मथुरा काशी गंगा सागर, मथुरा काशी गंगा सागर, सब धाम तुम्हारे चरणों में मैं बारंबार प्रणाम करूं। खुद आप दया के सागर हो, खुद आप दया के सागर हो, अमृत से भरी वो गागर हो। ये तन मन धन और शीश धरूं, ये तन मन धन और शीश धरूं, गुरु जी तुम्हारे चरणों में मैं बारंबार प्रणाम करूं। गुरु जी तुम्हारे चरणों में मैं बारंबार प्रणाम करूं। गुरु जी तुम्हारे चरणों में मैं बारंबार प्रणाम करूं। गुरु ज्ञान मिला, गुणगान मिला, गुरु ज्ञान मिला, गुणगान मिला, हमें मान से बड़ा सम्मान मिला। गुरु भक्ति करूं, गुरु सेवा करूं, गुरु भक्ति करूं, गुरु सेवा करूं, बने काम तुम्हारे चरणों में गुरु जी तुम्हारे चरणों में मैं बारंबार प्रणाम करूं। गुरु जी तुम्हारे चरणों में मैं बारंबार प्रणाम करूं। मैंने मात पिता से जन्म लिया, मैंने मात पिता से जन्म लिया, फिर आपने मुझको थाम लिया। मैं दासी हूँ माँ गुरु जी मेरे, मैं दासी हूँ माँ गुरु जी मेरे, लिखा नाम तुम्हारे चरणों में
Shall I play next song, Himad?
Yeah. Jai Gurudev Hema ji.
हाँ, जय गुरुदेव सीमा।
भावातीत ध्यान कर लो, जीवन पूर्ण बनेगा। भावातीत ध्यान कर लो, जीवन पूर्ण बनेगा। अनुभव कर लो, अनुभव कर लो, जीवन पूर्ण बनेगा। 20 मिनट बस ध्यान कर लो, जीवन पूर्ण बनेगा। सुबह शाम बस ध्यान कर लो, जीवन पूर्ण बनेगा। आसन प्राणायाम कर लो, जीवन पूर्ण बनेगा। अनुभव कर लो, अनुभव कर लो, जीवन पूर्ण बनेगा। भावातीत ध्यान कर लो। सबकी आत्मा शांति का सागर है, सबकी आत्मा आनंद का सागर है। सबकी आत्मा शांति का सागर है। सबकी आत्मा ज्ञान का सागर है। सबकी आत्मा ज्ञान का सागर है। सबकी आत्मा शक्ति का सागर है, सागर है, सागर है। अनुभव कर लो, अनुभव कर लो, जीवन पूर्ण बनेगा। 20 मिनट बस ध्यान कर लो, जीवन पूर्ण बनेगा। सुबह शाम बस ध्यान कर लो, जीवन पूर्ण बनेगा। आसन प्राणायाम कर लो, जीवन पूर्ण बनेगा। भावातीत ध्यान कर लो, जीवन पूर्ण बनेगा। अनुभव कर लो, अनुभव कर लो, जीवन पूर्ण बनेगा। भावातीत ध्यान कर लो।
गुरुर्ब्रह्मा गुरुर्विष्णुः गुरुर्देवो महेश्वरः गुरुः साक्षात् परं ब्रह्म तस्मै श्री गुरवे नमः। नारायणं परमं वशिष्ठं शक्तिं च तत्पुत्रपराशरं च व्यासं सुखं गौडपदं महान्तं गोविन्दयोगीन्द्रमथाच शिष्यं श्रीशङ्कराचार्यमथाच पद्मपादं च हस्तामलकं च शिष्यं तं त्रोटकं वार्तिककारमन्यान् अस्मद्गुरुं सन्ततमानतोऽस्मि। श्रुति स्मृति पुराणानाम् आलयं करुणालयम् नमामि भगवत्पादम् शङ्करं लोकशङ्करम्। शङ्करं शङ्कराचार्यम् केशवं वादरायणम् सूत्रभाष्यकृतौ वन्दे भगवन्तौ पुनः पुनः यद्वारे निखिलानिलिम्पपरिषत् सिद्धिं विधते निशम् श्रीमत्श्रीलसितं जगद्गुरुपदम् नत्वात्मतृप्तिं गताः लोका ज्ञानपयोदपाटनधुरम् श्रीशङ्करं शर्मदम् ब्रह्मानन्दसरस्वतीं गुरुवरम् ध्यायामि ज्योतिर्मयम् ध्यायामि ज्योतिर्मयम् ध्यायामि ज्योतिर्मयम्.
Jai Gurudev. Swagatam to our Maharishi Gita Satsang on chapter 4, Jnana Karma Sannyasa Yoga. Today we will be discussing shlokas 36 to 40. But before then, I will recap what we have studied in the last session. In the last session, we have learned in verses 32 to 35 that Vedas prescribe many yajnas, and all of these yajnas are born of action. Karmajan vidhi. They are either physical or mental. On physical level, you are pouring ghee, etc. into the Agni Kund. And that is on the gross level, physical. And when you do yajna on a subtler level, that is transcendental meditation, you are engaged in subtle mental activity. But both are activity, one on physical level, one on mental level. The significance and the role played by yajna in gaining enlightenment is explained in these shlokas. It is important to remember that yajna is activity in the relative. And when you go beyond activity, that is when you transcend, then only you experience the silence of the ultimate reality, that is Atma. And this is essential for rising in higher states of consciousness. So, the state of fulfillment is the goal of all action, goal of all yajna. And in this state of fulfillment is a state of knowledge. So, knowledge is the goal of all actions. So, this is an important point to remember, and that had been emphasized. And with this, the section on yajna was concluded, and we moved on to gain knowledge from the enlightened Guru. How to gain knowledge from the enlightened Guru. And we learned that 3 things are required: surrender, inquiry, and service. So the first requirement is surrender. And then one becomes receptive to Guru. When you surrender, you don't have a mind of your own anymore. You are completely in tune with Guru's thinking. And then there is no resistance because you have surrendered. No resistance on the part of the disciple. And knowledge flows freely from Guru to disciple. The second requirement is that intellect should be alert and sharp to what the Guru is saying. And we have seen throughout in Bhagavad Gita that Arjuna had been very alert and had been asking many questions, and that brought out beautiful knowledge from Sri Krishna Bhagavan. And the third requirement is you do service. Service to Guru, and you also fulfill your Guru's desires. And how do you know that your service is successful? You know that it is successful when the master is pleased. So, after you fulfill all these requirements and you gain knowledge from the Guru, then something very beautiful happens. And that is by adjusting to the likes and dislikes of the enlightened cosmic mind of the master, the ignorant mind of the student gradually gains that same status. What a beautiful thing to happen, in this process of gaining knowledge. So, by serving Guru, we get knowledge, and with this knowledge, we will not fall into moha, delusion. Moha means thinking that anatma is atma, thinking that your body is atma, not having any clue of what atma is, not having atma jnana. That means one is always in the field of duality. That is delusion. Because the reality of life is unity. And if one is in duality all the time, then that is delusion. So when this moha is gone, then knowledge dawns. And then one becomes enlightened. And then you will see all beings in yourself. And also, you see everything in God. So that is the summary of what we learned last week. And today, now, we will continue our discussion from verse number 36. So I see Ved Pandits are here. Mala of verses 34 and 35, please.
Om Shri Paramatmane Namaha Tatvidhi Pranipatena Pariprasnena Sevaya Upadekshanti Te Jnanam Jnaninastatvadarshinaha Yajñātvāna Punarmoha Evam Yasyasi Pandava Hena Bhutanyaseshena Drakshasyaatmanyatho Mayi Api Chedasi Papebhya Sarvebhya Papakritamama Krittamaha Sharabam Jnana Phalevenaiva Vijani Shantirishyasi Om.
Okay. So I will read the Sanskrita one more time and English translation, and then we'll continue with the reading of commentary. Api chedasi papebhya sarvebhya papakrittamaha sarvam jnanaplavenaiva rijinam santarishyati. Even if you were the most sinful of all sinners, you would cross over all evil by the raft of knowledge alone. Jai
Jai Gurudev. Having in the preceding verse extolled knowledge for its effectiveness in destroying delusion, Sri Krishna Bhagavan now speaks of its effectiveness in destroying sin. The special value of this knowledge lies in the fact that it eliminates the necessity for gaining knowledge about wrong action. The silent teaching here is that knowledge of the divine is a necessary and not knowledge of action, wrong action, and inaction as referred to in verse 17. This becomes all the more apparent in the light of the following verse, where Sri Krishna Bhagavan explains that all actions are burnt to ashes by the fire of knowledge. You would cross over all evil by the raft of knowledge alone. The word alone indicates that nothing other than knowledge is necessary for a man to cross over all evil. How one goes beyond evil in the state of enlightenment should be properly understood. It has been said in verse 35 that knowledge takes a man beyond delusion and molds his life in the oneness of God consciousness. In this state, one's life is on the supreme level of existence, being united with the Lord of all. All the laws of nature respond favorably to such a life, for it is in tune with the almighty, invincible force of nature, which is working out the evolution of everything in creation. In such a state, a man's every thought, word, and action produce a life supporting influence for himself and for the whole universe. This is a state of life where no wrong action is possible. In this state, one has crossed over all evil by the raft of knowledge. Knowledge is irresistible, for no one can resist himself. The state of knowledge at one level is the state of one's own self, transcendental consciousness. At another, it is the state of the self in the midst of activity, cosmic consciousness. At, at another, it is the state of God consciousness. Enlightenment is irrespective of anything in the relative field. Nothing can be an obstacle to enlightenment. However dense the darkness and however long it may be existed, one ray of the rising sun is enough to dispel the darkness, though it takes time to reach the brightness of the midday sun. Even a momentary flash of transcendental consciousness is enough to dispel the delusion of ignorance, though it takes time to gain full enlightenment in God consciousness, where one has crossed over all evil by the raft of knowledge. This brings hope even to a man whose life may be full of wrongdoing. Sin produces coarseness in the nervous system, preventing it from functioning normally and obstructing its ability to give rise to pure consciousness. Such an impaired state of the nervous system prevents being from directly influencing the field of activity. This is how, by attacking the physical structure of the nervous system and thus preventing pure consciousness from being lived in daily life, sin causes sorrow and suffering. Knowledge is eliminating this possibility. At the same time, roots out all possibility of sorrow and suffering. This verse recommends taking refuge in knowledge in order to rise above the possibility of any sin in life and promises redemption even to the worst sinner in the world. While in this verse, Sri Krishna Bhagavan promises release from the bondage of any wrong action through knowledge in the following verse. He promises the actual annihilation of all action in the fire of knowledge. Jai Gurudev.
So this shloka tells us that knowledge destroys sin. In the shloka translation, it says, you would cross over all evil by the act of knowledge alone. So how does this happen? When one is established in Atma, one's actions are in tune with natural law. His every thought, word, and action are fully life-supporting for himself and for the whole universe. And so, no wrong action is possible. No wrong action means no sin. And one has crossed over all evil because now he has Atmajnan, pure consciousness. Pure consciousness means knowledge of God, which is purifying. And also, to reach that state, you only need knowledge of divine. In the shloka, it says, only with knowledge you can cross over all evil. Only with knowledge. And you don't need the knowledge of right action, wrong action, inaction, and all that, because we have seen in this chapter, in 17th shloka, that the course of action is unfathomable. Gahana karmano gati. So, because it's not possible to know all the ramifications of all these actions, we just follow the instruction that Sri Krishna Bhagavan is giving. We transcend and experience pure consciousness. And once we are established in that, we have Atma Chetana, and then you get the benefit of right action, benefit of the action without knowing all the details of what this action is doing to us or to the whole environment. And then all these actions are life-supported. And then Maharishi said, knowledge is irresistible because knowledge is self. Self is knowledge. The inner self that we experience, that is knowledge. And no one can resist himself. So, when you begin to move towards your inner self, Atma, when you get the ball rolling, no obstacle exists. And then you will reach the goal. Because we have seen again in chapter 2, the 40th shloka, it says that no effort is lost. Once you start the process, no effort is lost. Neha bhikramanashosti. And so once you begin the practice, it takes us towards the goal. That's very reassuring. And sooner or later, we reach the goal. Doesn't matter, even if the darkness was very dense when you started the practice, and doesn't matter for how long it was lasting when we started the practice. That all will begin to go away. Just like when the sun begins to rise, the first ray of rising sun is enough to dispel the darkness. Though it takes a while to get to the brightness of midday sun. But that's okay, we have to be patient. Sin causes suffering and prevents pure consciousness. This situation is to take refuge in knowledge, go inwards, experience bliss consciousness of Atma. This way, even the worst sinner crosses over evil and is redeemed. So, the scientific research on this shloka, I'll cover it briefly because we have already covered it in many previous shlokas. It shows that transcendental meditation practitioners in maximum security jail in California showed that the rate of return of prisoners decreased significantly as compared to the controls. So, Pooja, is there a problem with the display? Unmute, please.
No, ma'am. I can display now.
Okay. So, any questions on what we discussed? Or any comments or appealing points? Okay. So now we will move on to the next shloka. Vedic Pandits will recite the shloka one time and then I will do it the second time. "37, please. Ghanshyam or Manish? Did they get disconnected? Okay, I will do it. यथैधांसि समिद्धोऽग्निर् भस्मसात् कुरुतेऽर्जुना ज्ञानाग्निः सर्वकर्माणि भस्मसात् कुरुते तथा यथैधांसि समिद्धोऽग्निर् भस्मसात् कुरुतेऽर्जुन ज्ञानाग्निः सर्वकर्माणि भस्मसात् कुरुते तथा. As a blazing fire turns fuel to ashes, so does the fire of knowledge turn all actions into ashes. Jai Gurudev.
Jai Gurudev Hemaji. Knowledge, that by which all sins are cast away, verse 30, and that by which you will see all beings in yourself and also in me, verse 35. Knowledge means awareness, which in its nature is pure consciousness. This state of knowledge is devoid of any activity. That is why Shri Krishna Bhagavan says that the fire of knowledge turns all actions into ashes. When this state has become permanently established in the nature of the mind, the self is experienced as separate from activity and its fruits. Verse 19. This is how the fire of knowledge, the fire of cosmic consciousness, turns all actions into ashes. When this state of consciousness, the state of knowledge, reaches its consummation in God consciousness, the separation of the self from activity dissolves into oneness of the self and activity. Thus, in its supreme state, all the fire of knowledge turns all actions into ashes. When Shri Krishna Bhagavan said in verse 33 that all action culminates in knowledge, he explained that once knowledge has been gained, actions have come to an end. They have fulfilled their final purpose. In this situation, man has arisen to a state of consciousness above the reach of activity. All activity, mental and physical, is carried out under the direct influence of the forces of nature, which are unconcerned with the consciousness of the doer. The doer finds himself established on a level of life which has nothing in common with the field of action. In this state, the action that is performed ceases to engage the consciousness of the actor. This is what the Sri Krishna Bhagavan means when he says that the fire of knowledge turns all actions into ashes. All actions, this expression has both qualitative and a quantitative meaning and also includes the range of time, past, present, and future. The impressions of the great past action, which serve as the seed for future action, become like roasted seeds, losing their potency. They is how the action of the past are burned in the fire of knowledge. Actions performed in the present remain on the level of the mind and senses. They do not touch the depths of mind anchored to the being, and therefore no deep impressions are created to be sorted as the seed for future actions. This is how actions performed in the present are burned in the fire of knowledge, completely eliminating the basis of future actions. This puts an end to the cycle of cause and effect in the field of action, and this in turn puts an end to the cycle of birth and death, bringing eternal freedom to life. Jai Gurudev.
So this verse is telling us about gyanagni. Atma is jnana swarupa, that is pure knowledge, pure consciousness. Knowledge means awareness. And when Bhagavan is pleased with our sadhana, he gives that knowledge to us. And this state is devoid of any activity, as we know. And this Agni burns all actions into ashes. And all sins are cast away. So all impressions of past actions and sins are destroyed because of this fire, because you are experiencing that, when you transcend. It is like the seeds are roasted in fire and they lose their potency, and so they do not germinate. And we know that it is these impressions of the past actions that are stored in our awareness. They are the cause of the future actions. So the cycle of actions, impression, this cycle goes on until we break it and until these impressions are removed. And they are removed and they are roasted like seeds in the fire of knowledge. And so future actions are eliminated. So this puts an end to the cycle of cause and effect in the field and to the cycle of birth and death, because it is this continuous actions going on all the time, that put us into this cycle of birth and death. So that is how breaking of this vicious cycle of actions and impressions becomes very important in gaining enlightenment. In Sanskrita, these are explained as 3 different types of actions. Actions that are stored, but they are not coming onto the surface level for us to go through them. They are called as sanchita karma. And these actions are stored in our awareness, in chitta. And without meditation, when we transcend and experience this gyanagni, these impressions are destroyed. So the past actions that are stored, before they take effect, before we experience them, they are destroyed. And so we don't have to go through those actions, the result of those actions. In other words, we don't face the consequences of those actions that are stored in the form of impression. That is called as sanchita karma. But there is other type of karma that is called as prarabdha karma. Prarabdha karma is that kind of karma where you have done something and it caused an impression, and when it is time for that action to be manifest, we experience that in our behavior, in our activity. And then if it was a violation of natural law, then it will cause pain and suffering. It is like you have shot an arrow and then it has left your hands. So because it had left, you don't have any control over where the arrow is going to hit. And so it is inevitable that you face the consequences of that action. For example, if somebody says, he shot the arrow and I thought it was a lion, but the arrow hits a cow and then the cow dies. So there is nothing you can do about it because the arrow had left already. So one has to face the consequences of the prarabdha karma. And so that we have to go through. But the biggest benefit of our meditation program and listening to Vishnu Sahasranama is that the impressions that are stored in our awareness, those are destroyed so that we don't have to face the consequences. So that's a very, big advantage in doing our program regularly. And the third type of karma is called as agami. That is actions you are performing now. And now we are meditating, we are transcending. And so the actions that we are performing now are not producing deep impressions. If anything, they are superficial impressions. And this is called as agami karma. Agami karma becomes less and less intense as we progress in our program and as we rise in cosmic consciousness. What happens is, before you start the program, and if we do perform actions, it is like drawing a line on a piece of rock. And the impression is deep and it stays there for a long time. As you are continuing your program, these impressions will become lighter and not so deep. It is like you are drawing a line in sand. They are more superficial and can be erased more easily. And then as you continue to rise in consciousness, these impressions will become even less deep. It's almost like it's not there. It's like drawing a line in water, where as you draw the line is disappearing because it's in water. And even that gets better. And then when you perform actions, when you're completely established in the silence of Atma, you experience Atma separate from activity, and then there is no impression. It's like drawing a line in the air. Do you see a line when you draw it in the air? No. You draw it, but it's not there. So that is agami karma. So when you are jivan mukta, when your intellect is steady, sthita prajna, you experience Atma as separate from activity, and then the actions do not produce any impressions on your awareness. So that is the advantage, benefit of transcending. And this can be accomplished by transcending only, because only then you experience yourself as separate from activity. Okay. Any questions on this? Or let me cover the scientific research. Actually, this scientific research also we have studied in the past. And the point is, in TM practitioners, there is improvement in academic performance. So we have studied that many times in the past. So we won't talk any more about that. So I'll stop here and take any questions. No questions? So let's move on.
Jai Maji.
Yes, Pooja.
If all the karma burns with the fire of knowledge, what about the future karmas we do?
That's what I said.
Get enlightened.
Right. So before we talk about future, we are talking about the present. So Vartamana, we are living in the present and we are performing actions. So what happens is, you are performing action, but these actions are not producing impressions, or that is in this enlightened person, Jivan Mukta, they won't produce any impression. But for those who are still on the path, they are performing action, and if they perform action, they produce an impression that are not so deep. So without any practice of transcendental meditation, the action that produce, the actions produce deep impressions. Like if you draw a line on the rock, right, Pooja? So with practice of meditation and with transcending, these impressions become less and less deep, to the point where they become so superficial that as you draw the line, they disappear. So they will not produce any impressions. So that way we get relief from this cycle of action, impression, vicious cycle. Did I answer your question?
Yes, Maji.
So that's why it's important to continue our program, even after somebody thinks that, oh, I'm in cosmic conscious now, I don't need to do any program anymore. We don't think like that. And we are studying that in 7th chapter. We continue to do our program because after meditation, we are engaging in activity. And in activity, there is always some, action, and we are bombarded by so many things in our surroundings. So we continue our meditation, and because we continue this program and we continue to transcend, we don't produce any impression. So we don't worry about the future action as long as we continue the program. That's the important thing. Okay? Okay, so let's move on to the next shloka. Pandits, are Pandits back or they're gone? They got disconnected, looks like. Okay, so I'll read the shloka. Nahi jnanena sadrusham pavitramiha vidyate tatsvayam yoga samsiddha कालेनात्मनि विन्दति न हि ज्ञानेन सदृशम् पवित्रमिह विद्यते तत्स्वयं योगसंसिद्धः कालेनात्मनि विन्दति.
Jai Gurudev. Truly, there is in this world nothing so purifying as knowledge. He who is perfected in yoga of himself in time finds this within himself. Nothing so purifying as knowledge. The work of a purifier is first to purify the different ingredients or components, and then, having freed the components from impurities, to present the whole compound in its pure state. Knowledge is the purifier of life. It purifies life in the sense that it analyzes the different aspects of existence and distinguishes and separates the eternal aspects from the transient. It acts like a filter to clear the mud from muddy water. The real nature of life is absolute bliss consciousness. This crystal water of life has been polluted by becoming mixed with the activities of the three gunas. This has resulted in masking the eternity of life behind its transient and ever changing aspects. The pure state of being is realized by knowing the relative and the absolute components of life. This knowing comes to perfection when the knower gains perfect intimacy with being and becomes fully aware of the basic activity of life, the activity of the three gunas, as separate from being. Perfect intimacy with being is gained when the mind gains the transcendental state of consciousness. This is the absolute state of knowledge, which can be described as a state of knowingness. When knowledge becomes perfect, it arrives at the state of knowingness and brings life to perfect purity. In this way, knowledge removes ignorance, which is the greatest impurity of life, and takes life out of the cycle of birth, death, and suffering. The superficial aspect of knowledge is knowing and understanding. The real nature of knowledge is the state of knowingness, the state of pure consciousness or being. Considering knowledge in this way, we find that transcendental consciousness represents the real nature of knowledge. Another phase of knowledge is where transcendental consciousness coexists with the activity of the waking state of consciousness. In this state, when transcendental consciousness becomes permanently established in the very nature of the mind, the absolute and relative phases of life begin to be appreciated simultaneously. The self is experienced as separate from activity. There is yet another state of knowledge in which the separateness of the self and activity dissolves into the unity of God consciousness, which is the most purified state of life, free from any stain of impurity. Such a life in absolute purity represents the supreme state of knowledge about which Sri Krishna Bhagavan says, "He who is perfected in yoga of himself in time finds this within himself." It may be added that only through transcendental meditation, which is the direct way to gain pure consciousness and rise finally to God consciousness, can absolute purity be lived in daily life. When the state of yoga, the state of transcendental consciousness, becomes permanent so that it maintains itself throughout all activity, one has reached the state of cosmic consciousness. Such perfect infusion of the absolute into relativity takes place by degrees. Through the regular practice of going to the transcendent and coming back to the field of action in daily life. A balanced alteration of meditation and activity results in full realization. One analogy will make this clear. We dip a white cloth in a yellow dye and let it remain in the dye to be colored for a few minutes. Then we take it out and expose it to the sun till the color begins to fade. We repeat the same process again, putting the cloth into the sunlight till the color fades. Similarly, we meditate for about half an hour and follow this by coming out to act in practical life for about 10 hours, by which time we begin to feel that we are out of the influence of the morning meditation. We meditate again in the same way and again let the influence fade by coming out into practical life. We keep repeating the process of gaining the state of universal being in transcendence samadhi during meditation and of coming out to regain individuality in the field of relative existence. This allows more and more infusion of being into the nature of the mind, even when it is engaged in activity through the senses. When the full infusion of being has been accomplished, then the state of cosmic consciousness has been gained. The state of cosmic consciousness provides the basis for the development of the state of perfected yoga in God consciousness. The development of cosmic consciousness into God consciousness requires that the separation found to exist between the self and activity be transformed into a fusion of these two separate identities, resulting in the eternal unity of God consciousness. This transformation of the state of separation takes place by the virtue of the most refined activity of all, the activity of devotion to God. In order to analyze the way in which the act of devotion effects this transformation and produces the state of eternal unity of God consciousness, it is necessary to examine closely how, in the state of cosmic consciousness, the self is experienced as separate from activity, how the eternal silence of transcendental self consciousness becomes compatible with the incessant activity of the waking state of consciousness. Those practicing transcendental meditation experience a slowing down of the metabolism during the inward stroke of meditation. They experience that the nervous system comes to a state of restful alertness when the mind transcends thought and gains transcendental consciousness. Again, they experience that the nervous system becomes active when it engages itself in the activity of thought or action. Any state of consciousness is the expression of a corresponding state of the nervous system. Transcendental consciousness corresponds to a certain specific state of the nervous system which transcends any activity and is therefore completely different from the state of nervous system which corresponds to the waking state of consciousness. Now, for transcendental consciousness to become permanent and to coexist with the waking state of consciousness, it is necessary that the two states of nervous system corresponding to these two states of consciousness should coexist. This is brought about by the mind gaining alternately transcendental consciousness and the waking state of consciousness, passing from one to the other. This gradual and systematic culture of the physical nervous system creates a physiological situation in which the two states of consciousness exist together simultaneously. It is well known that there exist in the nervous system many autonomous levels of function between which a system of coordination also exists. In the state of cosmic consciousness, two different levels of organization in the nervous system function simultaneously while maintaining their separate identities. By virtue of this anatomical separation of function, it becomes possible for transcendental consciousness to coexist with the waking state of consciousness and with the dreaming and sleeping states of consciousness. In the early stages of practice of transcendental meditation, these two levels of function in the nervous system are unable to occur at the same time. The function of the one inhibits the function of the other. That is why, at this stage, either transcendental consciousness or the waking state of consciousness is experienced. The practice of the mind in passing from one to another gradually overcomes this physiological inhibition, and the two levels begin to function perfectly at the same time without inhibiting each other and still maintaining their separate identities. The function of each is independent of the other, and that is why this state of the nervous system corresponds to cosmic consciousness, in which self awareness exists as separate from activity. Silence is experienced with activity and yet as separate from it. In order to develop cosmic consciousness to God consciousness, the nervous system needs to be cultured further so that these two levels, which function independently, come to function in an integrated manner. This will give rise to a state of consciousness in which the sense of separation between the self and activity is dissolved, and this duality constituting cosmic consciousness is subsumed into the unity of God consciousness. This integration of functions on the physiological level is brought about by a mental activity of ultimate refinement. In order to define activity of this quality, we must analyze the whole range of activity. The activity of the organs of action is the most gross. The activity of the senses of perception is more refined. The mental activity of thought is finer still, and the activity of feeling and emotion is the finest of all. One could further classify different levels of quality in emotional activity, such as anger, fear, despair, happiness, reverence, service, and love. The activity of devotion comprises the feelings of service, reverence, and love, which are the most refined qualities of feeling. It is through the activity of devotion that cosmic consciousness develops into God consciousness. When the nervous system is constantly exposed to this most refined activity of devotion, the physiological integration of functions that has been described takes place. And it is the permanent state of this condition of the nervous system that enables a man to live God consciousness in his daily life, acting in the midst of all sorts of circumstances, fulfilling the purpose of cosmic life. He carries the totality of existence within himself and moves in the unity of God. From this, it is clear that to develop God consciousness, which represents the supreme state of knowledge, it is necessary to culture the physical nervous system. This requires regular and sustained practice, which obviously needs time. That is why Sri Krishna Bhagavan says, in time finds within himself. By this expression, Sri Krishna Bhagavan wishes it to be clearly understood that the supreme state of knowledge is not gained from outside, it is gained within oneself when one has lived for some time the perfected state of yoga in God consciousness. The element of time indicates here that during the early stages of God consciousness, life is full of such overwhelming experience of unity in diversity that one lives deeply lost in it. Gradually, as time passes, one begins to appreciate this unity in terms of other things and activities in the world. It is then that one has realized God, that one has the knowledge of God. Thus, it becomes clearly why Sri Krishna Bhagavan speaks of the necessity for time in gaining supreme knowledge. Jai Gurudev.
So, this is the most important shloka of this chapter. Maharishi told MIU faculty in Fairfield that they should learn it by heart. So, if there are any Maharishi Vidya Mandir principals and teachers in the audience, it will be good to tell your students about it. And this verse is telling us what knowledge is. So, there are two main points here. The first main point is that knowledge is the best purifier. So let's see how knowledge purifies. Pure consciousness that we experience when we transcend, it is bliss consciousness and it is pure. And this crystal clear water of life had been polluted by the activity of the three gunas. So we have learned that relative is constituted by the gunas, sattva, rajas, tamas. And everything that is happening in the relative is the interplay of these gunas. But when you go beyond the gunas, that is when you transcend, then you become aware of that Atma that is pure. There are no gunas there. There is no activity there. It is silence. And so Atma is separate from activity, and you experience that when you transcend. So that is the absolute state of knowledge. It is a state of knowingness. And this brings life to perfect purity. This way, knowledge removes ignorance, which is the greatest impurity in life. So when you have knowledge, there can't be any ignorance. So ignorance is the biggest impurity. Ignorance causes suffering. And so when we go beyond the gunas, experience pure knowledge, This brings us out of the cycle of birth, death, and suffering. So that's the first point. Now then, the second point in the shloka about knowledge is that there are two aspects of knowledge. One is the superficial knowledge, which we gain by reading books and going to college, etc. There is a great value to it, but real knowledge is pure consciousness. It is knowingness, like we just said. And when this pure consciousness is maintained in waking, dreaming, and sleep states, it is cosmic consciousness. And as one grows in cosmic consciousness, the perception becomes more and more refined, heart begins to expand, appreciation of nature and creation increases. You're going for a walk, you see a sunrise, and immediately, you appreciate that beauty in the nature. And you begin to appreciate the Creator who created such beautiful nature. And then the tidal waves of love and devotion begin to, come out of your heart. You feel so happy. You have these waves of love for God. And in this situation, some talk to God all the time. Some dance in ecstasy. Some people cry. And all this experience is at the level of finest feeling and emotion. And this activity of devotion comprises of feelings of service, reverence, and love. So when you have more respect and love for somebody, you're growing in devotion. And with this activity of devotion, cosmic consciousness develops into God consciousness. And then the separateness of self and activity dissolves into unity of God consciousness. But there is one thing we need to do in order to rise from cosmic consciousness to God consciousness. And that is, we need to culture our nervous system so that these two levels of cosmic consciousness and God consciousness that are functioning separately, they come to function in an integrated manner. And we accomplish this with regular practice of meditation, alternating with activity. So we all know this example of dipping the cloth in yellow dye. We have been hearing about it from the time we learned to meditate. In 3 days checking, we get this knowledge. So let's say you want to color a cloth to yellow color. It's white cloth, you want to make it yellow. So you dip it in yellow dye and then you put it in the sun. You put it on the rope to dry. This, of course, was done in the olden days. And then this cloth dries up in the daytime in the sunshine. So in that process, some of the yellow dye, it fades away. So the color becomes lighter because the yellow dye faded away to some extent. But you repeat the process daily. So every day you find that some more yellow dye stays on the white cloth. And eventually the white cloth turns into yellow cloth. In the similar way, when we first begin meditation, we experience rest in meditation, and then you get up and you go to school or work or whatever, and then you're in the relative, you're, working or studying, and then the silence that you experience in meditation is not there anymore in activity. And so you sit down and meditate again after school or after work, and then you get deep rest again. So you repeat this process. So what happens, each time you sit down and do meditation, you bring some of that silence into activity. So gradually what happens, some of the silence stays with you in activity, and then you may not feel so rested towards the end of the day. So like that, you would continue the practice. Gradually, the silence stays with you for longer and longer till evening. And then even after evening, even in the night, even when you're sleeping, it stays with you. And so this is how the silence that you experience in meditation stays with you all the time, 24 hours a day. But that takes time. And during that time, what we do, we alternate rest and activity. That is the way we culture the nervous system. And so this is called as infusion of being. Infusion of being. You get to that integrated state where you are able to maintain silence in the midst of activity. Both stay together all the time. And because this takes time, it said in the shloka, Kalena Atmani Vindati, in time. That word in time is important. And then it is found within oneself. It's not somewhere outside. And the reason it happens in time is because there is a time for everything to happen. Let's say there is a bud and it takes time to bloom. We cannot force it to bloom. Today, I want the bud to bloom and the rose, I want it to become a flower. No, it doesn't happen that way. There is a time for everything. And in order to accomplish this, there is only one requirement, and that is we do our program regularly. And then when one is perfected in yoga, when we do the program, we are experiencing this union of the mind with Atma. And then when that reaches a state of perfection, you have Atma Jnana, and this is found in yourself. So then one has real knowledge of God as opposed to the superficial knowledge that we gain from reading books. So I'll stop here. Briefly, scientific research on this shloka shows that academic performance increases, which we already covered in the past in the other shlokas. So I'll stop here. Very beautiful shloka. Any questions? Or any appealing points? It's a long commentary. She explained everything so very beautifully. Okay, if there are no questions, we'll continue with the last shloka of today's discussion. Looks like the Pandits are gone. I will read the last one. Shraddhavan labhate jnanam tatparah samyatendriyah jnanam labdva param shantim achirenadhigacchati. Shraddhavan labhate jnanam tatparah samyatendriyah jnanam labdva param shantim achirenadhigacchati. He gains knowledge who is possessed of faith, is active of purpose, and has subdued the senses. Having gained knowledge, swiftly he comes to the supreme peace. Jay, good day.
Knowledge means awareness of unity in the midst of the diversity of life. When this awareness has become complete, it is said to be God consciousness. To rise from the waking state of consciousness to God consciousness, one has to pass through the states of transcendental consciousness and cosmic consciousness. In the sequence of development, one state leads to another in the order of waking, transcendental, cosmic, and God consciousness. They are as different from one another as spectacles of different colors through which the same view looks different. When the same object is cognized in different states of consciousness, its values are differently appreciated. Life is appreciated differently at each different level of consciousness. As the mind passes through all these states, it has to undergo various new experiences, which, in the absence of faith, can easily be misunderstood at any step. That is why Sri Krishna Bhagwan's name faith as a prerequisite to knowledge. There are three fields of faith: faith in oneself, faith in the teacher, and faith in God. Faith in oneself is necessary so that one does not begin to doubt one's own experience. Faith in the teacher enables one to accept the fundamentals of the teaching. If, in the absence of the faith, the basic principles of the teaching are rejected, one can neither derive any benefit from it nor verify its truth, since the truth of the teaching can be verified only by personal experience, which arises from the practice given by the teacher. Faith in God protects man's heart and mind and ensures that steady progress, which is so important in a life of a seeker. Faith provides an anchor in life, not only for the seeker of truth, but for any man. It is indeed for any accomplishment in life. For greater accomplishment, it is needed in greater measure. For ultimate fulfillment in God consciousness, the greatest faith is needed. Meditation is a process which provides increasing charm at every step on the way to the transcendent. The experience of this charm causes faith to grow. Moreover, the regular practice of meditation brings the great blessings of harmony and joy to life. This too helps the heart and mind to grow in faith and keeps a man active of purpose on the path of enlightenment, and thus stability is gained on the way. The activity of the senses also becomes balanced and natural. Thus, when a man begins the practice of transcendental meditation, he fulfills the condition necessary for enlightenment. The first ray of the rising sun is enough to dispel the darkness of the night, and yet it takes some time for the sun to become fully risen. Through meditation, the mind reaches transcendental consciousness quickly and is enlightened by the first ray of the divine. Yet to allow this transcendental divine consciousness to shine forth through all circumstances, through waking, dreaming, and dreamless state, regular practice of meditation is absolutely essential. Meditation takes the mind to the transcendental self consciousness, and a natural and a balanced activity infuses the transcendental divine nature into the mind, where it is not lost even when the mind is engaged in the field of activity. In this way, self consciousness grows to cosmic consciousness, Atmananda to Brahmananda, Savikalpa Samadhi to Nirvikalpa, and eventually this state of yoga, cosmic consciousness attains its different attains its fulfillment in God consciousness, the first ray of enlightenment reaches its full glory. This verse emphasizes the need for a man to be active of purpose and to have a natural balanced activity of the senses and the mind in addition to faith. All these combining harmoniously help to produce devotion, that highest quality in a seeker by which he accomplishes the final stage of his evolution. These taken together create a situation for unfolding of the supreme reality in its all embracing nature, raising the limited status of the individual to the unbounded status of cosmic consciousness, and eventually to that unity of life in God consciousness, which eternally satisfied the mind and the heart. Having gained this, a man in time gains knowledge, through which he becomes free from any doubt or delusion. This is the state of supreme peace, where the hearts rest in eternal contentment and the mind is filled with the unity of life, where there is no trace of duality, and therefore peace is abiding. Jai Gurudev.
Okay, now this shloka tells us about the value of Shraddha, faith, and that it is a prerequisite to knowledge. It also tells us that it is important to be active of purpose, which means one has to be intent in sadhana. And there are three fields of faith that are described here. One is faith in oneself. Second is faith in teacher. And the third one is faith in God. So faith in oneself means we should not doubt our experience. Some people tell me that, oh, I have been doing TM for so many years and I'm not getting anywhere. And so when such a doubt comes, then one should go to the local TM center, attend advanced meetings, listen to Maharishi lectures, and the teacher will explain to you, you have experience discussion, and then you get your doubts cleared. And then, it will give you satisfaction, and then one can be happy, with their program. And the other thing is, when you doubt your experience, you should trust your experience. Maharishi said, doubt your doubt. Don't let the doubt take over you. And then you will begin to enjoy your experience. The second thing is faith in teacher. This will help one to accept the teaching. So you accept what your guru is telling, and then you follow the program, and then you will have good experience. If you don't accept what the teacher is telling, so right from the beginning, there is this, discord. You say, oh, is it true what he's telling? Like that. So we just surrender and we accept the teaching. And the third point about faith is that you have faith in God. This will protect man's heart and mind, and it ensures steady progress in life. Faith is important because it provides an anchor in life. And when you have that, even in difficult times, if you have faith, you will continue your sadhana. Otherwise, you will say, I've been doing TM for so many years and I'm still having difficulties, problems in life. And then, you cannot progress in life with that kind of thinking. And because there is increasing charm with every step of meditation, one becomes intent in sadhana. Then it becomes easy to be active. We actively pursue our sadhana. So we become tatparaha. That is a Sanskrit word in the shloka. And one moves forward happily. And during this practice, we are getting more and more balanced. The senses become more balanced also. And then one rises in the state of waking. One rises from waking state to transcendental consciousness. then to cosmic consciousness, and then to God consciousness. And these states of consciousness are different. Each one is different. And life is appreciated as differently at all different levels of consciousness. And when self-consciousness grows to cosmic consciousness, that is, Atmananda grows to Brahmananda, and Savikalpa Samadhi to Nirvikalpa Samadhi, then this state of yoga attains its fulfillment in God consciousness. And in God consciousness, one has that awareness of unity in the midst of diversity of life. This is real knowledge. And this satisfies the mind and heart. Remember in the beginning how Arjuna had this split, even though he had fully developed mind and fully developed heart, there was no harmony between the two of them. Mind is saying something and heart is saying something. So he was unhappy. But when you grow to God consciousness, then this satisfies both mind and heart. And then one gets supreme peace. That is Param Shanti, where the heart rests in eternal contentment and mind is filled with the unity of life. There is no trace of duality there. And because there is no duality, it's all unity, then peace is abiding. Param Shanti. Very beautiful word to remember. Param Shanti. And I will cover scientific research next time because we are running out of time. I want to allow some time for questions, and then we will have a little bit of recitation. Any questions, please? If there are no questions, so we will do a very short meditation, and then I will recite the first and last shlokas of chapter 4, and then we can end. So let's sit comfortably and do a few minutes of group meditation. Jai Gurudev. Jai Gurudev. Because of time factor, I will read the first and last shlokas of chapter 4, and then we will end with Shanti Path. Shri Paramatmane Namaha. Atha Chaturthodhyayah. Jnana Karma Sannyasa Yogaha. Shri Bhagavanuvacha. Imam Vivaspate Yogam Proktavanahamavyayam Vivasvan Manaveptaha Manurikshvaka Vedravit. Tasmadajnanasambhutam Hritskam Jnanasinatmanah Chitvainam Samshayam Yogam Atishtotishtha Bharata. Tatsaditi Srimad Bhagavad Gita Upanishatsu Brahma Vidyayam Yoga Shastre Shri Krishna Arjuna Samvade Jnana Karma Sannyasa Yogo Nama Chaturthodhyayah. Shri Krishna Arpanamastu. Jai Gurudev. Sarve bhavantu sukhinah. Sarve santu niramaya. Sarve bhadrani pashyantu. Ma kaschid dukkha bhag bhavet. Shanti, shanti, shanti. Jai Gurudev. Thank you all for joining. Thank you, Anita ji. Thank you, Bindu. Next time I should ask you to recite. You can recite Gita, right? You're teaching the children.
Yes, Himaji.
Okay, I will remember. And Pooja can do the Shanti part. Today I forgot I did everything. Thank you all, Anita ji, Hima Bindu, and
Thank you,
Pooja for
Himaji.
staying. And Jai Gurudev, Bella,
Jai
and
Himaji.
Happy Girl, Jai Gurudev.
Jai Gurudev Hemanji.
Jai Gurudev Bella, and it's nice sharing Maharishi knowledge with you all. We'll meet next week, same time, and we will conclude the 4th chapter. And there are only 2 more shlokas for next week. We will cover those, and then I will summarize the chapter 4, and then following week we will begin chapter 5.
Jai Gurudev Himaji.
Jai Gurudev.
Jai Gurudev.
Jai Gurudev Puja. I'll end the